Ladies and gentlemen, please pay attention to the safety announcement. Coaches and divers must inform the referee if they consider that the diving facilities are unsafe in any way. If it becomes necessary to evacuate the building, please follow the instructions given by venue staff. To evacuate the building, all those present must use the marked emergency exits. Divers and officials must not return to the changing rooms to collect their clothes or belongings. Spectators, you will be assisted by venue staff. Please do not attempt to collect your children from poolside or changing rooms, as they will be assisted and accompanied by event staff. Spectators are requested not to use flash photography during the performance of a dive, as this can be distracting to the diver and could lead to an accident. In line with the recommendations in the Swim England Child Protection Policy, the promoters of this event request that any person wishing to engage in any video, zoom or close-range photography, including the use of mobile telephones with image capturing facility, must familiarise themselves with the Swim England photography policy. There is an appointed professional photographer for the duration of the event, Will Johnston Photography. Will Johnston Photography is proud to be the event's official photographer. Please visit their stand in the entrance foyer for details on how to purchase images from the weekend. Also, please order in the next 48 hours to save 20% on all products. Parents and carers of participants under the age of 18 who wish to take images are requested to focus on their own children as much as reasonably possible and to avoid including other children in images, particularly if those images are being shared with family and friends or through social media platforms. Whilst it is acknowledged that parents or carers wish to celebrate the achievements of their own children when taking part in aquatic events, it should be recognised and respected that other parents or carers may not wish for their child's image to be taken and shared in this way. Many thanks for your consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome the competitors in the female Group C platform competition, starting with Erin Simmons, City of Leeds Diving Club, Jessica Mather, City of Leeds Diving Club, Sophia Harris, Star Diving Club Guildford, Molly Cotter, Southend Diving, Emma Armstrong, Southampton Diving Academy, Emily Costello, City of Leeds Diving Club, Ella Duthie, Aberdeen Diving Club, Chloe McCurdy, City of Sheffield Diving Club, Lila Ross, Edinburgh Diving Club, Amelia Cole, City of Sheffield Diving Club, Belle Curley, Edinburgh Diving Club, Olivia Leslie, Aberdeen Diving Club, Isla Berry, Aberdeen Diving Club, Darcy Napier-Ray, Aberdeen Diving Club, Ella Coupland, City of Leeds Diving Club, Alice Morsky, Dive London Aquatics Club, Vicky Chen, Edinburgh Diving Club, Florence Brindley, Star Diving Club Guildford, and Casey Illingworth, Southend Diving.
And please welcome the competitors in the Open Group B 1 metre event. Start 1, Luke Raggett, Dive London Aquatics. Jamie Lamplew, Edinburgh Diving Club. Ben Mattams, Cambridge City Dive Team. Simon Bykoff, Aberdeen Diving. Archie Isbell, City of Leeds Diving. Noah Havis, Southend Diving. Leo Robinette, Star Diving Club. Louis McHughes, Plymouth Diving. Will Heath, Plymouth Diving. Jesse Jamal, Dive London Aquatics. Dominic Williams, Cambridge Dive Team. Hayden Lowe, Southend Diving. Lincoln Stevens, Plymouth Diving. Alex Southwell, Edinburgh Diving. David Tomlinson, City of Leeds Diving. Tom Mantle, Edinburgh Diving. Ben Morris, Aberdeen Diving. Rufus Board, Cambridge City Dive Team. Marin Fraser, City of Bradford. Charles Tibbets, Cambridge Dive Team, and Moss Lever, City of Leeds Diving Club. Good luck to all competitors if you'd like to make your way to your station.
For all who are able, please stand for the national anthem. Could we ask athletes to prepare ready for their competition and judges to seats, please?
And please allow me to introduce our judges on 1 metre. Our referee is Roger Page. Judge 1, Steve Jackson. Judge 2, Joel Trenchard. Judge 3, Cherry Owing. Judge 4, Tommy Hawkins. And Judge 5, Julie Bassano.
And the officials on platform. The referee is Emily Saunders. Judge 1, Matt Pipe. Judge 2, Fito Gutierrez. Judge 3, Nikki Alsop. Judge 4, Lexi Bushnell. And Judge 5, Sophie Bolton. Can we have divers to boards as fast as possible, please?
And with the referee's permission, may we begin the event on 1 metre, please? Thank you very much. And our first diver, Luke Raggett, Dive London Aquatics Club, inward dive, piked.
And can we have referee's permission on platform, please? Thank you. Our first diver on platform is Erin Simmons, City of Leeds Diving Club. Forward 1.5 somersaults, piked 7.5 metres.
6, 6, 6, 6, 7. Jamie Lamplew, Edinburgh Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
5, 4.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5. Jessica Mather, City of Leeds Diving Club, inward dive, piked, 7.5 meters.
7, 6.5, 7, 6, 6.5. Ben Matham's Cambridge Dive Team, inward dive, piked.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5.
5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.
Sophia Harris, Star Diving Club, Guildford, forward dive, piked, 7.5 meters.
Simon Bykoff, Aberdeen Diving Club, back dive, pike.
6, 6, 6, 5.5, 6.5. Molly Cotter, Southend Diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked, 5 meters.
4, 3.5, 4.5, 5, 4. Archie Isbell, City of Leeds Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 5, 5, 5, 5.5. Emma Armstrong, Southampton Diving Academy, forward dive, piked, 5 meters.
2, 5, 5, 5.5, 6. Noah Havis, Southend Diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 5, 6.5. Emily Costello, City of Leeds Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked, 7.5 meters.
6, 5, 6.5, 6, 5.5. Leo Robinette, Star Diving Club Guildford, inward dive, piked.
6, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Ella Duthie, Aberdeen Diving Club, inward dive, piked, 7.5 meters.
6.5, 6.5, 7.5, 7, 7.5. Louis McHugh, Plymouth Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
4.5, 6, 4.5, 6.5, 5.5. Chloe McCurdy, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked, 5 meters.
5.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5, 5. Will Heath, Plymouth Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
5.5, 6, 6, 5, 5. Lila Ross, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward dive, piked, 7.5 meters.
6, 6, 6.5, 7, 6. Jessie Jamal, Dive London Aquatics, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Amelia Cole, City of Sheffield Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked, 5 meters.
6.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5. Dominic Williams, Cambridge Dive Team, inward dive, piked.
5, 6, 6, 6, 5.5. Belle Curley, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward dive, piked, 7.5 meters.
6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Hayden Lowe, Southend Diving, forward 1.5 somersaults pike.
5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Olivia Leslie, Aberdeen Diving Club, inward dive piked 5 meters.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5. Lincoln Stevens, Plymouth Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Isla Berry, Aberdeen Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults piked 5 meters.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Alex Southwell, Edinburgh Diving Club, inward dive, pike.
4, 4, 4, 4.5, 4.5. Darcy Napier Ray, Aberdeen Diving Club, forward dive piked 7.5 meters.
6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6. David Tomlinson, City of Leeds Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
6, 6, 5, 6.5, 5.5. Ella Coupland, City of Leeds Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults piked 7.5 meters.
6, 7, 7, 7, 6.5.
6.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 6.
Tom Mantle, Edinburgh Diving Club, reverse dive, piked.
Alice Morsky, Dive London Aquatics Club, forward dive piked 7.5 meters.
6, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5. Ben Morris, Aberdeen Diving Club, inward dive, piked.
7.5, 8, 7, 7.5, 7.5. Vicky Chen, Edinburgh Diving Club, inward dive piked.
6, 6.5, 5.5, 7, 6.5. Rufus Board, Cambridge Dive Team, back dive, piked.
6, 6, 4.5, 5.5, 6. Florence Brindley, Star Diving Club, Guildford, inward dive piked 5 meters.
7, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Marin Fraser, City of Bradford Esprit, inward dive, piked.
4.5, 5.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5. Casey Illingworth, Southend Diving, inward dive piked 7.5 meters.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 4.5. Charles Tibbetts, Cambridge Dive Team, inward dive, piked. 6, 7, 6, 7.5, 5.5.
7.5, 7.5, 6.5, 8, 7.
Moss Lever, City of Leeds Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
Round 2 on platform. Erin, back dive piked, 7.5 meters.
Six, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. On to round 2 on 1 meter. Luke, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
4.5, 4, 4, 3.5, 4. Jessica, forward 1.5 somersaults piked, 7.5 meters.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Jamie, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
4, 4.5, 4, 4, 4. Sophia, back dive piked, 7.5 meters.
4.5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Ben, forward 1.5 somersaults piked. 7, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.
7.5, 8.5, 8, 7.5, 7.
Simon, reverse dive piked.
Molly, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position, 5 meters.
4.5, 3.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Archie, back dive piked.
4, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 4. Emma, inward dive, piked, 5 meters.
4.5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5. Noah, inward dive, piked.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 6.5, 6. Emily, back dive, piked, 7.5 meters.
6.5, 6, 6, 6, 7. Leo, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
4, 3.5, 4, 3.5, 4.5. Ella, back dive, piked, 5 meters.
6, 6, 7, 6, 7. Louis, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5, 5.
5.5, 6, 6, 5, 5.5.
Chloe, inward dive, piked, 5 meters.
Will, back dive, piked.
5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5.
6.5, 6.5, 7.5, 5.5, 6.5.
Lila, inward dive piked, 7.5 meters.
Jesse, inward dive piked.
Six and a half, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Amelia, back dive piked, 5 meters.
Six and a half, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5. Dominic, forward 1.5 somersaults piked. Six and a half, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 7. Hayden, back dive piked.
4.5, 4, 4, 4.5, 4.5. Bell, inward dive piked, 7.5 meters.
Five, 5.5, 4.5. Lincoln, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
4.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Olivia, back dive with tuck, 5 meters.
Four and a half, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Alex, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 5, 5.5. Isla, back dive with tuck, 5 meters.
Four and a half, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.
3.5, 3, 3.5, 3.5, 4.
David, inward dive piked.
Darcy, inward dive piked, 5 meters. Five, 5, 5, 5, 5.
7, 7, 6.5, 7, 6.
Ella, arm stand somersault piked, 7.5 meters.
Tom, forward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 6.5, 7.5, 7, 6, 6.5.
4, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 4.5. Alice, inward dive piked, 5 meters.
Ben, forward 1.5 somersaults piked. 6, 6.5, 6, 6, 6.5.
6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5.
Rufus, reverse dive piked.
Vicky, back dive piked, 5 meters.
6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6, 6. Marin forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
Four and a half, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Florence, forward 1.5 somersaults piked, 5 meters.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Charles, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
4, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Casey, back dive piked, 5 meters.
6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Moss, inward dive piked. 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6. On to round 3 on 1 meter. Luke, back dive piked.
6, 6, 6, 6, 6. Round 3 on platform. Erin, reverse dive piked, 7.5 meters.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6. Jamie, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 4.5, 5.5, 3.5, 5. Jessica, arm stand somersault piked, 5 meters.
4, 4, 5, 5, 4.5. Ben, back dive piked.
3, 2.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4. Sophia, reverse dive piked, 5 meters.
5, 5, 5.5, 6, 5. Simon, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
6, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5. Molly, reverse dive with tuck, 5 meters.
4, 4.5, 5, 5, 4.5. Archie, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
3, 2.5, 3, 3, 3. Emma, back dive piked, 5 meters.
5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6, 5. Noah, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 3.5, 5. Emily, arm stand somersault piked, 7.5 meters.
5, 5, 5.5, 5, 4.5. Leo, back dive piked.
5.5, 6, 5.5, 5, 5.5.
6, 6, 6.5, 7, 6.5.
Ella, reverse dive with tuck, 5 meters.
Louis, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Five, 5, 5, 5, 5. Chloe, back dive, piked, 5 meters.
3.5, 3.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4. Will, reverse dive piked.
5.5, 5, 5, 4.5, 5.
7, 6.5, 7, 6, 6.
Lila, back dive with tuck, 5 meters.
Jessie, back dive piked.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5. Amelia, reverse dive, piked, 5 meters.
4.5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Dominic, back dive piked. 3, 4.5, 5.5, 6, 4.5. Hayden, reverse dive pike.
4.5, 4, 4, 4, 5. Bell, back dive, piked, 5 meters.
5, 5, 6.5, 5.5, 5.
3.5, 4.5, 4, 4, 4.
Lincoln, reverse dive pike.
Olivia, reverse dive with tuck, 5 meters.
'We're on the same diver, so we're going about the same speed.
4.5, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5. Isla, reverse dive with tuck, 5 meters.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Alex, back dive piked.
6, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6. Darcy, back dive with tuck, 5 meters.
5.5, 4, 5, 5, 5. David, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
5, 5, 5.5, 6, 6. Ella, reverse dive, piked, 5 meters.
6, 6, 6.5, 4.5, 6. Tom, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Alice, back dive piked 5 meters.
Isn't it? 5, 4.5, 4.5, 6, 4.5. Ben, back dive piked.
5.5, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 6. Vicky, reverse dive piked 5 meters.
6, 6, 6, 6, 5.5. Rufus, forward 1.5 somersaults piked.
4.5, 3, 5.5, 4.5, 3.5. Florence, back dive piked 5 meters.
6, 7, 6.5, 6, 6. Marin, back dive with tuck.
4.5, 5, 5, 4.5, 5. Casey, reverse dive piked 7.5 meters.
4, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4. Charles, back dive piked. 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Moss, back dive piked.
5, 4, 4, 4.5, 4.5. We're on to round 4. Erin, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters.
4, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4. Round 4 on 1 meter. Luke, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
6, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.
5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.
Jessica, back dive piked 5 meters.
Jamie, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 5.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Ben, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
4.5, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Sophia, forward 1.5 somersaults piked 7.5 meters.
4.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5. Simon, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
7, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7.5. Molly, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters.
5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Archie, reverse dive piked.
4.5, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 4. Emma, reverse dive piked 5 meters.
5.5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Noah, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5.5, 4.5, 4, 6.5, 6.5. Emily, forward 2.5 somersaults piked 7.5 meters.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Leo, reverse dive piked. 6, 5.5, 6, 6, 6.
5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5.
Louis, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position.
Ella, forward 1.5 somersaults piked 7.5 meters. 6, 6, 5, 5, 4.5. Chloe, reverse dive piked 5 meters.
4, 5, 6, 4.5, 5. Will, forward 1.5 somersaults, pike.
4.5, 4.5, 3.5, 4.5, 4.5.
6, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.
Lila, reverse dive with tuck 5 meters.
Jesse, reverse dive, piked.
4, 4, 4, 5, 5. Amelia, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters.
6.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Dominic, reverse 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position. 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6. Hayden, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
4, 4.5, 5, 3.5, 4. Bell, reverse dive piked 5 meters.
5, 4.5, 5, 5, 4.5. Lincoln, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
3.5, 3, 3, 4, 4. Olivia, arm stand somersault piked 7.5 meters. 5, 6, 4.5, 4, 6. Isla, arm stand somersault, piked 5 meters.
3, 2.5, 4, 4.5, 3. Alex, reverse dive, piked. 6, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. David, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
6, 6, 6, 6.5, 5.5. Darcy, reverse dive with tuck 5 meters.
4.5, 4, 4.5, 5.5, 5.
5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5.
Tom, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Ella, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters.
5, 5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Ben, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5, 4.5, 5.5, 5, 5. Alice, reverse dive, piked 5 meters.
6.5, 6.5, 6, 6, 6. Rufus, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 6. Vicky, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked 7.5 meters.
5.5, 5, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5. Marin, reverse dive, piked.
5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 7.
5.5, 4.5, 5, 5, 4.5.
Florence, reverse dive, piked 5 meters.
Charles, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position. 3.5, 3.5, 4, 4, 3.5.
3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 4, 3.
Moss, reverse dive, piked.
Casey, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked 7.5 meters.
6.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 6. Round 5 on 1 meter. Luke, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
6, 6, 5.5, 6, 6. And we're on to round 5. Erin, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked 7.5 meters.
6, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5. Jamie, inward 1.5 somersaults piked.
4, 5, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5. Jessica, reverse dive piked, 5 meters.
5, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Ben, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 2.5, 2, 4, 5.5. Sophia, arm stand somersault, piked, 7.5 meters.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Simon, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6, 6.5. Molly, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
6.5, 6, 5.5, 6, 6. Archie, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 6.5, 6, 4.5, 5.5. Emma, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked, 5 meters.
5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Noah, inward 1.5 somersaults piked.
7, 7.5, 7, 8, 6.5. Emily, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Leo, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 4.5, 4, 3.5, 4. Ella, arm stand somersault, piked, 7.5 meters.
6, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Louis, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
And that was a restarted dive. The judges will mark the scores out of 10, and a 2-point deduction will be made for the restart. Scores are 1, 1, 1.5, half, and 2.5. Chloe, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
5.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5, 5. Will, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5.5, 4, 4.5, 4.5.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6.
Lila, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked, 7.5 meters.
Jesse, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 6.5, 6, 5.5, 6. Amelia, arm stand somersault, piked 7.5 meters.
6, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5. Dominic, inward, 1.5 somersaults, piked.
5, 5, 5.5, 3, 5.5. Bell, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked 7.5 meters.
5, 6, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Hayden, forward 2.5 somersaults, pipe.
5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 6. Olivia, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked 7.5 meters.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Lincoln, reverse, 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
6, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 6. Isla, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked 5 meters.
2, 2, 3, 2.5, 1.5. Alex, back, 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
6, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Darcy, arm stand somersault, piked 7.5 meters. 4, 4.5, 4, 4, 5.
6, 4.5, 5, 5, 4.5.
Ella, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters.
David, inward, 1.5 somersaults, piped.
4, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 4.5. Alice, forward 1.5 somersaults, piked 5 meters.
5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Tom, reverse, 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 5, 5. Vicky, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters.
6.5, 6, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Ben, inward, 1.5 somersaults, piked.
4, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. Florence, arm stand somersault, piked 5 meters.
6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Rufus, inward, 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 3.5, 4, 3.5, 4.
5.5, 6.5, 6, 5, 5.
Casey, arm stand somersault, piked, 7.5 meters.
Marin, forward, double somersault with tuck.
Four and a half, 4, 4, 5.
5, 4.5, 5, 4, 4.5.
Final round on platform. Erin Simmons, City of Leeds Diving Club, arm stand somersault, piked, 7.5 meters.
Charles, back, 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Five, 5.5, 5, 4, 5.
7, 5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.
Jessica Mather, City of Leeds Diving Club, inward, 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
Moss, inward, 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Four and a half, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Round 6 on 1 meter. Luke, forward, 2.5 somersaults, piked.
2.5, 2.5, 3, 4, 3. Sophia Harris, Star Diving Club, Guildford, inward, 1.5 somersaults, piked, 7.5 meters.
Four and a half, 5, 5, 4.5, 5. Jamie, forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
5, 5, 5, 5, 5.5. Molly Cotter, Southend Diving, forward, 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position, 5 meters.
4, 5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Ben, inward, 1.5 somersaults, piked.
3.5, 3.5, 4, 4, 3.5. Emma Armstrong, Southampton Diving Academy, inward, 1.5 somersaults, piked, 5 meters.
5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Simon, back, 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Emily Costello, City of Leeds Diving Club, inward, 1.5 somersaults, piked, 7.5 meters.
4.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 4. Archie, back, 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 6.5. Ella Duthie, Aberdeen Diving Club, inward, 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
5, 4.5, 5, 5, 4.5. Noah, forward, 2.5 somersaults, piked.
5, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. Chloe McCurdy, City of Sheffield Diving Club, arm stand somersault, piked, 5 meters.
5, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 4. Leo, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 4, 5, 6.5, 5. Lila Ross, Edinburgh Diving Club. Arm stand somersault, piked 7.5 meters.
Six, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Louis, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 4, 4, 4, 5. Amelia Cole, City of Sheffield Diving Club. Forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters.
Four and a half, 5, 5.5, 4. Will, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 5, 5, 4.5, 4.5. Bell Curley, Edinburgh Diving Club. Inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters.
Seven, 6, 5.5, 5, 6. Jesse, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Olivia Leslie, Aberdeen Diving Club. Inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters. Four, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 4.5. Isla Berry, Aberdeen Diving Club. Forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters.
5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Dominic, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 4.5, 4, 4.5, 4.
5, 5, 6, 5, 6.
Darcy Napier Ray, Aberdeen Diving Club. Inward 1.5 somersaults piked 7.5 meters.
Hayden, inward 1.5 somersaults, piked.
Sorry, I'll re-announce for Darcy. Darcy Napier Ray, Aberdeen Diving Club. Forward 1.5 somersaults piked 7.5 meters.
5, 5.5, 5, 6, 5. Lincoln, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck.
5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Ella Coupland, City of Leeds Diving Club. Forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck 5 meters.
3.5, 3, 4, 4.5, 2.5. Alex, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
4, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 3.5. Alice Morsky, Dive London Aquatics Club. Inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
5, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5. David, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck.
Five and a half, 5, 6, 5.5. Vicky Chen, Edinburgh Diving Club. Back 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
7.5, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6. Tom, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position.
Three, 4, 4, 3.5, 3.5.
4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5.
Florence Brindley, Star Diving Club Guildford. Inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck, 5 meters.
Ben, forward 2.5 somersaults, piked.
Four, 4, 3.5, 4.5, 3.5. Casey Illingworth, Southend Diving. Inward 1.5 somersaults, piked, 7.5 meters.
6, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Rufus, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Three, 4, 4.5, 4, 3.5. Marin, back, somersault, half twist, free position. Four and a half, 5, 3.5, 4.5. Charles, forward, double somersault, piked.
4, 4, 4, 5.5, 4.5. And that concludes the female Group C platform competition. Thank you, divers, coaches, team managers, officials, and volunteers.
Three and a half, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Moss, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck. 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. On to round 7, our final round of dives on 1 metre. Luke Raggett, Dive London Aquatics Club, inward 1.5 somersaults, pike. 6, 6, 5, 6, 6. Jamie Lamplew, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. 4.5, 5.5, 6, 4.5, 4.5. Ben Mattens, Cambridge dive team. Forward, 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6. Simon Bykov, Aberdeen Diving Club. Forward, 2.5 somersaults with tuck. One, 3, 2, 2, 1.5. Archie Isbell, City of Leeds Diving Club, reverse 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Four and a half, 4.5, 4.5, 5.5, 3.5. Noah Havis, Southend Diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, free position. Ladies and gentlemen, I will re-announce Noah's dive. Noah Havis, Southend Diving, forward 1.5 somersaults, 2 twists, free position. Six and a half, 6, 6, 6, 5.5. Leo Robinette, Star Diving Club Guildford, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Three, 3, 4.5, 4, 4. Louis McHugh, Plymouth Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults piked. 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 3.5. Will Heath, Plymouth Diving Club, forward 1.5 somersaults, 1 twist, free position. Six and a half, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Jessie Jamal, Dive London Aquatics Club, forward double somersault with tuck. Five and a half, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Dominic Williams, Cambridge Dive Team, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position. Seven, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6.5. Hayden Lowe, Southend Diving, back 1.5 somersaults, 1.5 twists, free position. Four and a half, 4.5, 5, 5, 5. Lincoln Stevens, Plymouth Diving Club, inward 1.5 somersaults, pike. Four, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 3.5. Alex Southwell, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Three, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 2. David Tomlinson, City of Leeds Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Three, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 3.5. Tom Mantle, Edinburgh Diving Club, forward 2.5 somersaults with tuck. Three and a half, 3.5, 4.5, 4, 3. Ben Morris, Aberdeen Diving Club, back 1.5 somersaults, half twist, free position. 6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 7, 6. Rufus Board, Cambridge Dive Team, back 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Six, 4.5, 5.5, 5, 5. Marin Fraser, City of Bradford Esprit Diving, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Four and a half, 4, 5, 4, 4.5. Charles Tibbetts, Cambridge Dive Team, inward 1.5 somersaults with tuck. Six and a half, 7, 6.5, 6, 6.5. And our final diver of this event, Moss Lever, City of Leeds Diving Club, forward double somersault piked. Two, 2.5, 3, 2.5, 2.5. Thank you, divers, coaches, team managers, officials, and volunteers. That concludes the Open Group B 1 metre event.